Two women graduated from the same public high school in suburban Denver. They sat in some of the same classrooms, worked similar part time jobs as teenagers, came from families with comparable incomes, and started adult life with no dramatic difference in advantage. Neither inherited money, neither married into wealth, neither built a company or got lucky with stock picks. In fact, for most of their working years, their lives looked strangely parallel. After college, both entered stable professional careers. One worked in project management for a logistics company, the other became a senior administrator for a hospital network. Their salaries rose at almost the same pace over the years. By midlife, both were earning in the low six figures. Both had children, both owned homes, both drove decent cars. Both looked from the outside like financially responsible adults doing what they were supposed to do. At 67, however, their lives looked nothing alike. Laura retired with roughly $1.8 million invested, no mortgage, no consumer debt, and enough flexibility to spend long stretches visiting national parks with her husband. She helps one grandson with tuition, sends her daughter money when a home repair hits at the wrong time, and orders what she wants at restaurants without doing mental arithmetic before the bill arrives. Michelle, meanwhile, reached the same age with about $240,000 saved, a home loan that still had 9 years left, rising credit card balances, and a constant low grade panic she never seemed able to shake. She picked up weekend shifts at a garden center because her monthly income wasn't enough to cover everything. She studies utility bills the way other people study medical test results. Some nights she lies awake wondering which expense can be delayed if property taxes go up again. Same country, same generation, similar education, similar pay, completely different ending. That split did not begin in their 20s. In their 20s, both women were still trying to get established. Their incomes were modest, their savings capacity was limited. They were paying rent, building careers, and trying to survive adulthood without embarrassing themselves financially. There simply was not enough money moving through their lives yet for small differences to create huge separation. The gap didn't really open in their 30s either. During that decade, both were busy with children, work, car payments, childcare, and the usual scramble of young family life. Their budgets were stretched. Their expenses were rising. They were making decent decisions overall and living in ways that still looked fairly alike. And by their 50s, the deeper trajectory was already in motion. The real split happened in their 40s. That was the decade when one of them made a string of choices that looked harmless while they were happening. The other made different choices that also looked harmless. Neither decision set felt dramatic. Neither woman believed she was shaping the entire texture of her later life. But that is exactly what happened. Your 40s are often the most important financial decade you will ever live through. Not because everything suddenly becomes more complicated, and not because you are under some unique curse. The reason is more mechanical than that. Your 40s sit in the middle of a rare overlap that does not exist for long. Income is high, time still matters, and expenses often stop accelerating the way they did earlier. That combination creates enormous leverage. If you use that decade well, it can build a retirement that feels roomy and stable. If you waste it, later effort rarely fully repairs the damage. To understand why, you need to understand the three forces that tend to collide during this period of life. The first is earning power. For many people, the years between 41 and 54 are the most productive income years they will ever have. Raises may no longer feel explosive the way they did earlier in a career, but the actual dollar amounts are bigger than ever. A person making $135,000 at 46 has far more raw material to build wealth than they did at 31, making $68,000, even if the percentage raise now feels less exciting. This matters because wealth is built not only from discipline, but from surplus. And for many households, the first time meaningful surplus becomes possible is in the 40s. The second force is time. At 40, money invested still has roughly 2 decades or more to grow before a traditional retirement age. That is enough time for compounding to remain powerful. A dollar invested at 41 does a very different job from a dollar invested at 56. The earlier dollar has time to work, reinvest, and multiply. The later dollar still helps, but it does not have the same runway. This is what people often underestimate. They believe they can delay serious saving until their 50s and simply make up for it by contributing more. But later contributions are fighting with less time. The mathematics are not forgiving. The third force is expense maturity. By the 40s, many households stop adding brand new categories of cost. The furniture is bought, the career wardrobe exists, the starter home scramble is over. Young children become more independent. Some recurring costs stabilize. There is often more room in the budget than there was in the exhausting years of the 30s. The question is, what happens to that room? Does it flow toward investing and debt reduction, or does it quietly disappear into a more expensive lifestyle? That is where the real divide begins. Imagine someone who reaches 40 with $120,000 invested for retirement. They earn $125,000 a year and could realistically save 16% of their income, around $20,000 annually. If they do that steadily from 40 to 67 and invest in broad, low cost funds with reasonable long term growth, they can end up with well over $1.5 million. Now imagine another version of that same person. Same starting savings, same income, same market. But through most of their 40s, they contribute very little because they decide those years are finally the time to loosen up. They renovate the kitchen, upgrade cars, spend more on vacations, and let retirement contributions fall to something like 4% of income. At 50, they wake up, panic, and begin saving aggressively. Even with strong effort later, they may still end up hundreds of thousands of dollars behind the person who used their 40s properly. That is the brutal reality of timing. The money you save in your 40s does not just add to your future, it has time to multiply. The money you delay saving has no way to recover the lost years. This is why seemingly normal midlife decisions matter so much. Take housing. For many families, the 40s are when the urge to move up becomes intense. The kids want more room. Careers are going well. Friends are upgrading. It starts to feel reasonable to leave the perfectly serviceable house and buy the one with the extra office, larger yard, nicer neighborhood, and better finishes. Suppose a family moves from a $420,000 house into a $760,000 one. Their monthly housing costs might rise by $8,000 to $2,800, $400 once mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance are considered. In the moment, it feels manageable because the income exists, but that added cost is not just a monthly burden. Over 20 to 25 years, that decision can redirect hundreds of thousands of dollars away from investment growth. The house is not just costing more now, it is absorbing future freedom. Cars tell a similar story. Midlife often brings a quiet identity shift. The reliable car that used to be good enough suddenly feels too plain. The older SUV looks out of step with career progress. People begin treating vehicles not as transportation, but as evidence. The difference between two modest, dependable vehicles and two premium vehicles may not feel devastating month to month, but higher payments, higher insurance, pricier repairs, and faster replacement cycles can drain an astonishing amount of long term wealth. What looks like a lifestyle upgrade can become a retirement downgrade. Then there is the most emotionally charged category of all, children. Your 40s often coincide with the most expensive parenting years. Teen activities, sports, tutoring, travel teams, first cars, college applications, tuition decisions. This is where many good parents unintentionally injure their own future. Some stop saving for retirement entirely to cover college costs. Some take on enormous parent loans. Some raid retirement accounts because they cannot bear the thought of their child choosing a cheaper school. They tell themselves they will catch up later. But later is not nearly as generous as people imagine. Children in their late teens or early 20s still have time to recover from student loans, scholarships lost, or modest trade offs. Parents in their late 40s and early 50s have far less time to rebuild depleted retirement savings. The families who handle this well often make choices that feel uncomfortable in the moment. They talk honestly about cost. They favor in state tuition, community college transfers, scholarship strategies, and student contribution. They refuse to set themselves on fire financially in order to preserve a more polished experience for their kids. Another crucial midlife decision is career movement. The 40s are often the last truly strong window for strategic income acceleration. A move into leadership, a shift into a higher paying company, a bold change into a better paying specialty, a calculated risk that could raise earnings significantly. Yet many people become more cautious exactly when the opportunity matters most. Comfort becomes expensive. They stay in a role because it is familiar. They avoid the awkwardness of change. They tell themselves stability matters more than growth. Sometimes that is true, but sometimes the refusal to make a smart move costs them $25,000 or $35,000 a year in additional income during the very decade when extra income matters most. Now layer all of that onto social pressure. The 40s are when comparison starts wearing nicer clothes. Friends renovate kitchens. Coworkers buy lake houses. Neighbors redo landscaping. Drive luxury SUVs. Post photos from Tuscany and call it normal. The pressure is subtle but relentless. If your career has gone well, should your lifestyle not also make a statement? This is where many people get trapped, not by recklessness, by normalization. They do not feel irresponsible. They feel current. That is what happened with Michelle and Laura. At 41, they looked surprisingly similar on paper. Laura and her husband had around $210,000 saved for retirement, owned a three-bedroom house with about $190,000 left on the mortgage, and had two kids in middle school. Their household income had climbed to about $172,000. Michelle and her husband were close behind. They had about $195,000 saved, two children in similar grades, and household earnings around $178,000. They too owned a decent home and seemed on track. Then the decisions started. Michelle and her husband chose to move to a larger home in a newer subdivision with better finishes and a bigger yard. The payment jump felt fine. They told themselves this was the season to enjoy what they had worked for. That move raised their housing costs by roughly $2,100 a month. A couple years later, Michelle replaced her sedan with a luxury SUV. Not outrageously lavish, just nicer. Her husband did the same after his promotion. Their auto costs quietly climbed. Then came club sports, private coaching, out of state college tours, and eventually a decision to help their oldest attend a private university with a price tag far beyond what their original plan could support. To bridge the gap, they borrowed. Retirement contributions were trimmed temporarily. Nothing felt insane on its own. Each decision sounded reasonable in conversation. At 51, Michelle looked around and realized something alarming. Despite 10 years of higher income, they had not moved forward the way they should have. Their retirement balances had grown, but nowhere near enough. Too much cash flow had been feeding lifestyle structure. They tried to correct course in a hurry, but the decade that offered the best leverage was already behind them. Laura's household made different choices. They stayed in their existing home, even after discussing an upgrade multiple times. The house was not perfect, but it worked. Instead of turning higher income into a larger mortgage, they funneled the difference into retirement and a taxable investment account. When a car needed replacing, they bought a lightly used model rather than turning the moment into a status statement. When college came into view, they had direct conversations with their children early. Merit aid mattered. In-state options mattered. Cost mattered. The kids did not get every version of the dream, but they graduated without destroying their parents' future. During their 40s, Laura sometimes felt as if they were saying no more often than the people around them. Their vacations were good, not extravagant. Their home looked nice, not aspirational. Their cars were respectable, not impressive. But by 52, the math was undeniable. Their retirement savings had surged because the decade's leverage had been used rather than consumed. The money had not merely been contributed, it had been given time. That is the central point. During midlife, people often believe they are choosing between sacrifice and enjoyment. That framing is wrong. What they are actually choosing between is temporary display and lasting freedom. The larger house feels exciting for a while, then becomes normal. The nicer car feels special, then becomes transportation. The luxury upgrade thrills you briefly, then it fades into background expectation. But the money that could have been invested does not forget where it went. This is why people who inflate their lifestyle in their 40s are often shocked later. They assume they were just enjoying life a little. In reality, they were trading away decades of future flexibility for a few years of elevated normalcy. The real reward of restraint is delayed, but it is enormous. The person who protects their 40s often gets to enjoy their 60s and 70s with genuine ease. They have choices. They are not narrofied by a roof replacement. They can help family when they want to. They can travel. They can they can say no to work that exhausts them. They can age without the constant soundtrack of financial worry. That is gratification in a far deeper form than upgraded granite countertops or a luxury badge on the hood of a car. If you are in your 20s or 30s, the gift is awareness. You now know what midlife tends to bring: bigger income, stronger comparison pressure, and 1,000 invitations to quietly overexpand. Build habits now that will protect you later. Automate saving. Learn to define enough before your income gives you the option to ignore the question. If you are entering your 40s, you are walking into a decade of enormous consequence. Audit the big categories: housing, transportation, education planning, savings rate, and career trajectory. Make conscious decisions. Midlife punishes autopilot. If you are in your late 40s and recognize yourself in the wrong pattern, there is still time to improve the outcome. Raise the savings rate. Delay upgrades. Consider downsizing earlier instead of later. Cut expensive vehicle habits. Make one brave career move if it materially improves income. Stop thinking only in monthly terms. Start thinking in remaining decades. And if you're already past your 40s, focus on what remains controllable. Work longer if necessary. Maximize benefits wisely. Reduce fixed costs aggressively. Unlock home equity if that is the smart move. You may not be able to recreate ideal conditions, but you can still improve the years ahead. Underneath all of this is a psychological trap that catches good people. By midlife, many feel they have earned the right to finally loosen up. They have worked hard. They have delayed. They want evidence that the effort meant something. That desire is understandable. But the most dangerous financial mistake of the 40s is confusing visible reward with actual reward. Visible reward is expensive and short lived. Actual reward is durable. Visible reward looks like a bigger life. Actual reward feels like a lighter one. Now picture yourself at 72. In one version of the future, you are on a porch somewhere with coffee in your hand, thinking about whether you want to visit your daughter next month or wait until fall. Your home is paid off. Unexpected bills are annoying, not destabilizing. You make plans without fear woven into every detail. In the other version, you are staring at a spreadsheet or bank app, trying to decide what gets postponed this month. You are worried about prescriptions, house repairs, and whether another few years of work will be enough. You have fewer options than you expected and more pressure than you imagined. Both futures are built long before 72. And for many people, the most important construction happens between 40 and 50. That decade passes whether you direct it or drift through it. The only real question is what kind of older self you are creating while it passes. Your 40s do not determine everything because of fate. They determine so much because of leverage, more income, enough time, stabilizing expenses, compounding choices. That is not bad news. It is an opening. What you do with it will shape far more of your future than most people realize, while they still have the chance to choose.